This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Russev.
And hello and welcome. This is our traditional Thursday edition of WEBIT Virtual, and today we shall have special guests in our studio as usual. We don't go for anybody but special only. Today's specialty of our guests is that they have a huge power of their voice, being part of and working for very respectful global media and covering topics which particularly today are all about the future of work and education. It's going to be a fantastic wrap up of even more fantastic week. On Tuesday, we had the founder of Khan Academy, Sao Khan. We had the godmother of the Silicon Valley and 2 times teacher and person of the year, someone who's been doing amazing things for the well-being of the humankind, Esther Wojcicki. And we had some other great participants, best-selling authors, and a media representative who was helping me moderate that particular amazing edition of WEBIT Virtual and Future of Work and Education, who you will see today again. Yesterday, we had 3 fantastic startups, and one of them won. Don from Israel, from Tel Aviv, took the award for the best startup in the field of education and future of work. And today I'm going to present you first the 4 participants in this panel, and then we will jump in a great discussion which will help you understand what is the future of work, what you, all of you, are going to be doing hopefully in the near future, and what is the education. And you know very well, we've discussed that education will change dramatically, has to change dramatically, because we shall be studying all our life long, and we shall be having more than 1, 2, 3, 4 professions. So stay with us and hear all these exciting themes. I have nothing else to do but to present my first panelist. Look who she is.
Christina Zdanowicz is a senior producer at CNN. Her expertise lies in online storytelling, breaking news, user-generated content, and finding great stories. She is a leader at CNN Digital and manages the hectic evening shift for the Social Discovery team, the network's hub for social media news gathering.
Christina, welcome back.
Hey, good to be here again. Thank you.
11 years with CNN. You must be institutionalized.
Kind of, yeah. I feel like I know people across all sorts of different shifts. So, yeah.
I can imagine you know people across all around the world. And I'm very grateful for joining us again this week as part of the Future of Work and Education Leading Media Forum, second time. And thank you for being with us. Allow me to introduce the other 3 panelists, and we all going to start our discussion. So let me introduce you my second guest.
Kantrowitz is a senior technology reporter at BuzzFeed News. He is the author of Always Day One. He covers how Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Snapchat are shaping the way we share information and interact. He has published in-depth stories on Facebook's artificial intelligence research division.
Alex, hello, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Great having you with us.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for spending time with our wonderful community. We've had over 6,000 people registered, and I see the numbers wrapping up. So they all look forward to amazing discussion, not less than I do, with such a fantastic panelist. So thank you for joining, and allow me to introduce our next guest.
Connie Lee is a reporter-producer for CGTN America, based in Washington, D.C. She's been covering global headlines throughout her career. She previously lived in South Korea as a journalist and has produced documentaries in Seoul and in Jordan.
Welcome, Connie. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Dr. Russev.
It's such a pleasure
Nice to be
have you with
here.
us. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine.
You have such a great CV so far, and we're very grateful for joining our community for the first time. So it's a special meeting. We've been around for the past 13 years, and this is our first, unfortunately or fortunately, virtual encounter. So welcome to WEBIT.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Allow me to introduce our fourth participant, and we go full-fledged. Look who is our fourth panelist.
Jared Lindzon is a journalist and a public speaker based in Toronto. Beyond his regular columns in Fast Company, The Guardian and The Globe and Mail, Lindzon has also been published in the New York Times, Politico, the BBC, Rolling Stone, Aussie, Fortune magazine, Time magazine, and many more.
Hello, Jared. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
No, it's us that enjoy meeting our community members from all around the world and having these meaningful discussions in times of uncertainty. So now when we're the five of us in the studio, I would like to start with a question to you. And I feel like we are going to have Christina, the most prepared, being already with us 2 days ago. I would like Christina to start with a very brief and sharp visionary on where do you see the future of work and education heading. And this is the tricky thing. It must be short answer.
Well, I mean, from the conversation we had on Tuesday, there were some scary things, but then there were some really exciting things, right? Like the thing that stuck out to me most was Salman Khan talking about 1.5 billion kids currently are not physically in school. So think about the worldwide scope of that and just how many people this is affecting. And what was interesting about it is then Esther Wojcicki got on camera and talked about how the education system has been disrupted. And you know what? That's a good thing. That gives us a chance to reinvent our education system worldwide. And maybe it gives us a chance to find new ways to teach things. And the same kind of went for work, right? Like things are changing. We're not working in the same way. Look at all of us on, WEBIT right now talking virtually in the middle of this crazy news cycle. There could be some opportunities to work in a new way, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. I can't agree more with you, Christina. And at the end of the day, it's very important to look at every change positively. Otherwise, we shall be putting a lot of negative expectations out there, and it will be becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, yeah, thank you for this. Connie, what will be your take on that?
Yes, I agree with what Christina has said. And I think in the future, we're going to see a lot of blending between physical and virtual work. And companies and schools are going to have to innovate to survive and to thrive during this time, post the pandemic too. Like entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk always says, you got to innovate or you will die. And so I think we're going to see a lot of changes and, companies trying to come up with new ways to accommodate for employees and then for schools to accommodate for students.
Thank you so much, Connie. And Jared.
Hello.
Hello again.
So yeah, I mean, to piggyback what my fellow panelists are saying, I absolutely agree that this moment of disruption actually provides a perfect opportunity to make some very badly needed changes that have been needed for a long time. It's just a question of whether or not we're able to seize the moment. And it's especially difficult when it feels like just getting through the next day or the next week or the next month feels like a challenge. How do you disrupt this legacy system in the process? But that is where the key is. That's where the opportunity is, because as you're sort of changing things on the fly, a lot of those changes are going to end up being permanent, because we're going to discover that they were better than the way we were doing things all along. So that is how I see the pandemic shaping the future of work and bringing it here much faster than it was scheduled to arrive originally.
Absolutely. I have a lot of questions for you all, but let me hear also Alex on that one.
Yeah, look, when we think about the future of work, I really think we need to separate work into two categories. The first is idea work. That's anything involved with creating a new product and bringing it to life. And the second part of it is execution work. That's anything that's involved in supporting an existing product. In today's economy, almost all companies spend their time largely on execution work. Very little time is actually spent on coming up with new things. And that's why companies are generally pretty slow to develop new products. So you have what happens is a company gets out there, develops something, tries to milk the asset as much as they can, and then they eventually die. In the 1920s, the average company spent 67 years on the Fortune 500. Today, it's 15 years. I just wrote this book about the tech giants, and they're bucking the trend. What they're doing is, as they get bigger, they're getting stronger. And the way they're doing this is they're using technology to minimize the amount of execution work inside their companies and maximize the amount of time they have for idea work. So their employees, compared to traditional companies, are spending much more time developing new things because they've used automation, artificial intelligence, and collaboration software to be able to work on ideas way more than supporting existing products. They put those existing products on autopilot using technology. And a quick word on education. If we're going to be spending more of our time on ideas, we need to develop an education system that's focused on getting people to think inventively, getting people to think, in a way that makes them take chances and think out of the box. Right now, I went to speak with professors to talk about what do you think the impact of automation is going to be on our world. And there was real distress because they saw their students operating in one way. They memorize and spit back. They're optimizing only towards the A's. And I know it's cliche to say, but they're not taking any risks. And they don't, think of problems in the abstract, more of just how to get from point A to point B. So I do think that we need an education system that's going to focus on, people thinking more in an idea versus an execution way. And if we get to that stage, then we're going to end up in a much better economy.
Thank you, Alex. Kristen, we have so many challenging things happening in US these days. We're not even going to talk about this. Let me just wrap it up, though. We have the COVID, we have the protests. And how do you cover all this working remotely? Because at the end of the day, that's the new reality that COVID has brought us into.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to be working from home during one of the biggest stories of potentially all of our careers, like the coronavirus pandemic. I'm on week 12 of working from home, and that's not really something you do as a journalist. Like, you go in the newsroom or you're out there in the field and you're talking to people. So it was a really big change. And some of the things that have been hard have just been the news is constantly happening. So you find yourself working more and more hours. You're so invested in the story. I am personally, I've talked to dozens of families who lost loved ones to COVID-19. And, it means a lot to them for us to tell their story. So I keep going. But at the same time, we're trying to create these boundaries. Even at work, we have this Slack system where if you're not working, you have a logo that says X, you're not in right now. Otherwise, everybody just assumes that you're always available, always there to tell a story, always there to do something. So within the first few weeks, it was kind of interesting for people to make a system to say, hey, I can work right now, or, we have shifts. But at the same time, I think the real challenge is going to be to draw some lines, which, now that's kind of become complicated because like I had to pull an overnight shift on Saturday, and covering these protests, I'm working late pretty much every night. But the story is so important that I know that at some point things will be a little less chaotic. I hope so for our country, but right now the work is there and we just have to do it.
I know, it's crazy. Based on your research, Connie, I know that you've been covering this for a while. What are the new tactics? What are the new solutions that companies implement? We all know that Twitter and Shopify have announced that people can permanently stay at home and work from home. So how does it? What have you seen around?
Yeah, like what you said, Twitter and Shopify, and I think Google too, they're already giving their employees the option to stay at home permanently. We've also seen a lot of companies give stipends for employees to buy office supplies and equipment to make those permanent adjustments at home. And I think we are pretty much moving towards working remotely here in the US. Last year alone, more than 60% of companies allowed remote work and 20% of companies were already completely remote. And now after the pandemic, though, we will probably see these numbers spike. And Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO behind Facebook, says that within the next 10 years, he expects that as much as 50% of his company will be working fully remotely. And I think a recent survey by Gartner had said nearly 75% of CFOs said they want to shift at least 5% of their employees to a remote working model. And so I think a lot of the companies are slowly shifting. And like I think one of the panelists mentioned before, it's just coming faster than we anticipated because of this pandemic.
Absolutely. For everyone, I believe for everyone, and including the tech giants who need to adapt to the new realities. The saying tech giants, that brings me to Alex, who has written his book, Always Day One, how the tech giants plan to stay on the top forever, and reveals the inner workings of Amazon, of Facebook, Google, Apple, and Microsoft, showing how to compete with the tech titans using their own playbook. So, Alex, why we all need to reinvent like the tech giants in this new world we live in?
That's right. So the tech giants, the book title called Always Day One, they approach each day as if it's their first, which means they don't spend a lot of time thinking about their legacy business or what's making them money today. They'll think about what's going to make them money in the future. And I think the pandemic really has been a forcing function. Many businesses have been content, like I mentioned in, my first, little comment, that, many businesses have been content to build an asset and milk it for all it's worth. Even the tech giants have done this. I mean, look at Microsoft, right? For a long time, they said, we are the Windows company. And then they became a desktop operating system in a mobile and cloud world. And all of a sudden it became a joke. And only after they reinvented themselves as a cloud company did they actually become the most valuable company or most valuable tech company in the world again. So I do think that because we have the lowest cost to start up a company in history, we have the lowest time it takes to start a company in history, that if companies feel like they can sit on their advantage forever, they're mistaken. And so it means we do need to live in this world where, companies are constantly reinventing. It can be tiring for some, but I think, if done the right way, it can really be invigorating and exciting. And I think, again, going back to the pandemic, what the pandemic has done is shown every business that there's going to come a time in your existence where you're going to need to take everything you do, put it aside, and find a way to operate anew. My favorite story about this is about a company called Flying Elephant Productions in Ireland. This company was an events company. It was building stages and it was building props. And Plamen, you know this well. We're not going to have physical events at least for another 6 months. So the question was basically, do you want to shut down the company or reinvent and try to find a way forward? They chose the second option. They had these great woodworking skills, and someone came in and asked if they could build them a desk because they started working from home. They said, okay, we can give that a shot. They built a great desk, and then within a month, they had built and sold, more than 2,000 desks, and started to build sanitizer stations where, like, we're going to start to be going in public again, and there's going to be businesses that are going to need stations for, hand sanitizer. And they've been able to keep the company afloat by going into two completely new businesses. And most companies, I don't really think, they don't really think of the need to reinvent. And that's why the idea for a company like Flying Elephant to build desks never really showed up. But I do think right now we're starting to see more companies become more flexible, become more open to doing new things. And that's going to start to make them, be capable of reinventing. And hopefully we're going to go from an economy dominated by 5 tech companies to one where more companies will get into the spirit. They won't allow themselves to be, disrupted away. And we'll have a more even and fair economy as a result.
Oh, that sounds very, very, very optimistic, Alex. Thank you for this beam of optimism. I can't agree more. It hasn't been easier in the history to start a company. But I think the problem is that it's never been harder to build a business. And exactly these tech giants are one of the biggest obstacles, because they don't go for 1 or 2 verticals, they go for the world. And I think it's we will see this in the future, how more and more entrepreneurs will be trying to grow like completely new verticals which are not already taken by the giants. That's where I believe the creativity will come, but we'll see how this is going to work. For that, though, we need very, very well-educated people. And that's why I would like to bring Jared in the discussion here. I've mentioned already the long life learning of and the journey of education. So why learning no longer ends with graduation, dear Jared?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And actually, it kind of relates to what Alex is saying, because he's talking about the need for constant innovation and the way we've been sort of educated, the way we've sort of broken down the human life for the longest time is you have this period where you go to school and you learn, and you're supposed to learn everything you're going to need to know for the rest of your career. And then you go to work, and traditionally it was for 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 companies. And then you finish and you go rest. And you have these 3 distinct periods of your lifetime, the learn time, the work time, and the rest time. And I believe that in many ways, we're seeing all 3 of those sort of phases blending together. And so first of all, we're seeing more and more students trying to enter the workforce in smaller ways earlier. And there's lots of new opportunities with things like the gig economy, the freelance economy, ways to sort of dip a toe into the workforce before graduation. There's also a lot more emphasis on mental health and ensuring that students aren't burning out and that they're getting this balance. For those who are in the workforce, there certainly isn't an endpoint to their education. And again, as my fellow panelists have been discussing, there's a need for constant innovation, for constant learning, because what you've learned in school is probably going to be obsolete by the time you graduate, let alone 15, 20 years into your career. And again, there is this greater emphasis on work-life balance. And then finally, in that sort of retirement phase, we're seeing more and more retirees re-entering the workforce, going back to school, and declaring that they're not done contributing to society just because they've reached the age of 65 or whatever. And so I think we're seeing those 3 previously distinct periods of the human life blending together more and more as time goes on. And I think that is going to be necessary in order to ensure that people have not only the skills, but the mental health and positive well-being to continue innovating.
Mental health is key, I believe, here.
Mm-hmm.
And we most probably need to add a completely new vertical in the whole education system called resilience.
Absolutely.
Because with all these changes that come ahead, we need people who will know how to protect their mental health.
Absolutely. And employers have been talking about valuing soft skills for a really long time, things like resiliency and communication and leadership. And those were all sort of nice ideas. But I think what the pandemic really highlighted is how important those skills are in practice, that Just having gone to school and learned the trade that you go into isn't necessarily enough to thrive, especially now when things are so crazy. You need that strength. You need those skills that aren't as easy to teach in school and not as easy to evaluate, traditionally speaking, and haven't been valued as much, traditionally speaking. But now we're starting to see that change, and especially the pandemic and the craziness of the last few months has really put an emphasis on how important things like resiliency are to success.
Absolutely. I can't agree more, Jared. Christina, I'm coming back to you because I know you do a lot of mentoring of young journalists in high schools and college. And I know you are also leading your team internally at CNN with the internship program. So what does the future of internship looks like for students? Because those that graduate now, I'm sure feel quite strange in this environment where we that do things cannot plan. I cannot imagine how they plan that future.
It's a super hard time right now. I mean, I have interns 3 times a year, and this is the first time in 6 years where I don't have an intern. They were supposed to be starting this week. And it's so difficult because we're all
Being
in
at
this,
home.
virtual environment. So I think part of the challenge will be going on, because we're going to be in this situation for a while, is setting up a framework and a process for onboarding people virtually. And I think this goes across the board, across industry, right? Like what I do in person is I train someone, basically lose my voice by the end of the first week, and make sure that they know how to verify things on social media, make sure they know our writing style, who to talk to, how our team works. All this stuff is done when you're sitting right next to the other person, right? And especially for somebody who maybe has never been in a newsroom, that experience is so valuable to be in the newsroom. Well, now, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens come fall, what happens come the next terms, and having set up a system. Like maybe there will be a Zoom orientation that starts. So at least these interns have a cohort of people that they can talk to so they don't feel alone, because you're not sitting with your team. You don't have that, built-in relationship. And I think another part, and I've been thinking about this a lot for the next term, but maybe having something like an open video line or open conference line where the intern can speak with you and not just feel like they're slacking to this person who they've never even met. So I think a virtual video presence will be super important, and just being available for these students. They're brilliant. They bring so much. I learned so much from these, college students that come to CNN all the time. And then, I really want them to come away with the bylines, come away with, a positive experience to be on their resume. Because right now I'm hearing from so many kids who are saying, all these internships, like NPR closed down their internship for the summer, and a lot of other companies did as well. So they're asking what to do. And I'm basically saying, I would just keep writing, keep being a journalist, keep being a photographer, put yourself out there, put your work out there, and don't stop just because you're not under the byline of, a newspaper or a digital website, right? Keep doing the work you love, because it will be noticed.
Absolutely. And indeed, I mean, if you look at this, how these young people perceive the future now, while they were thinking they can go and, take some craft, like the craft of journalism or any craft, and being hungry to learn new skills. And now, out of nowhere, there is nothing happening, and they have not pretty much of a choice. So that's quite challenging. But I think it's the same for not only for students, for all of us, for countries. Connie, what do you think a country like US can learn from other countries who have been dealing with the outbreak longer and have reopened and come back to work and school? Obviously, I mean China in this case, but also South Korea and others.
Yeah, I think the US is in some ways maybe fortunate. I don't like to use that word, but we do have an example to follow. We can see how China and, like you mentioned, South Korea has reopened. So if you look at, let's say China, for example, there's the large e-commerce company JD.com, which has fully reopened and have employees coming back to the headquarters into Beijing. First off, they didn't let the employees come in all at once. They let employees come in phases. And so I think that's something that the US could be looking into come fall or maybe next year, letting employees come in phases or having employees have different shifts. So I think JD.com is also having 2 different shifts for people to come in so that not a lot of people are in the building all at once. And also they redesigned their workplaces, their offices, whether that's, separating the desks or the workstations. They put down the canteens or cafeterias, and they're using the conference rooms to kind of spread out their employees. One interesting thing, though, they've also limited number of people in the elevators, and they have different markings inside the elevators too, so that people are not standing close to each other. And now, for schools too, South Korea have allowed students to come back also in phases, and depending on how hard the city was, they also allowed certain students to come back. But they also did a lot of testing too. So before the students entered the building or before the school started again, they had all the students retested or tested for COVID-19, just to make sure that everyone comes back to school negative. And so they've also required masks for each student, and they purchased these barriers or these plexiglass things around the desk. So it looks, if you see the pictures, it looks pretty daunting. It looks a little surreal, but it is possible. They are keeping the number of COVID-19 cases low. So it does seem to be working in South Korea. So maybe the schools in the US could adopt those practices once schools start again physically.
Thank you. Well, we have, again, to remind you, it's a live program, #WEBIT, and ask your questions to our wonderful participant here in this leading media forum. I'm going to ask Alex. We were talking about basically reinventing the way we commute, the way we go to work, the way we study. How about companies? Why do we all need to reinvent now, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I said it previously, but the economy. So think about the tools that are available to companies right now that are working on a single product. They have cloud computing that can help them set up pretty quickly. They have artificial intelligence, which could help them spend more time on idea work and less time on execution work. They have collaboration tools, which can have a company like Google, for instance, come together and bring every part of the company together to build the Google Assistant. So again, like if you're not reinventing, you're in some big trouble. I mean, the Google example is interesting. A lot of people think that Google is a company that just cracked the search code and wrote it to hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap. But in truth, it was very different. Google began as a website, google.com, that you would access on Microsoft's browser, Internet Explorer. Then Google realized it was a bit of a pain to get to its site. So they built a toolbar, a browser extension that would go onto Internet Explorer. You'd install it and be able to type right from the browser, your search, and it would bring up the website. Actually, 60% of Google search went through the toolbar at that time. They started to see Microsoft playing some games. Microsoft was developing its own search engine, Live Search, because it was sending billions of dollars of value to Google. And why do that if the whole thing was operating in the browser? Live Search would eventually become Bing. And if Google hadn't built its own browser, Chrome, we might be using Bing as a verb today instead of Google. It's really what would have happened. So Google got Chrome up and running. It was doing a pretty good job on the on the desktop, but then we moved to the age of mobile. So Google had to reinvent again. It acquired and developed Android. And now we're moving to another moment where we are going from typing on our phones to talking to our phones. And I got a muter, but Amazon developed Alexa, and people started asking questions to Alexa that they would have asked to Google. What's the weather? What time will this happen? What's the answer to this question? And then Google had to bring the whole company together and collaborate and build the Google Assistant. So even Google, a company that seems to have one product and has sort of been riding it for that many times, has reinvented, five times in just over a decade. So I think again that if a company doesn't take this approach, it's going to be pretty soon that a competitor is going to be in their market and be eating their lunch. And I think learning how to reinvent, it's not just a mentality, but it's a culture. It's a set of technologies and processes that you put into place. And learning how to reinvent is the thing that's going to keep you relevant moving forward. And again, we're in a forcing function moment right now. There's nothing like a pandemic that keeps everybody in their house to make people rethink the way they run their operation, the way to make them rethink what company culture is and what leadership is. And we're certainly seeing a lot of change today. And the companies that do well in this moment are going to be the ones that ride it out.
I can't agree more, Alex. Thanks for sharing this. It's a wonderful way to showcase the way that Google has been through, and we all know it, but the way you said it makes it so clear that unless you reinvent yourself, and this is like every 2 years, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the name of the game. And, you mentioned earlier, like we're going to, the tech giants are getting into our businesses. I think there's ways to build businesses inside their platforms and do very well. But if you want to keep ahead of them, then use their playbook and do it. Otherwise, you're just going to give up your business, to these companies, and who wants to do that?
No, but you just said it. In order for Google to emancipate, to build its own business, they had to move away from Microsoft. Otherwise, Microsoft would have been eating them. So as long as you use somebody else's platform, this is a very good opportunity for that someone else to eat your lunch, as you said, that allegory, which is quite feasible, right? So it's the survival of the fittest and the most adaptable, isn't it? Nothing changed.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, because we're going through all these shifts, this is a moment where everybody's vulnerable too. I mean, there's so much opportunity in the market because it's all been torn down and it's going to build back up. And people who view this as an opportunity moment are going to be the ones that thrive. And people who hang their heads and say it's all over, it's going to be, as you put it, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Thank you, Alex. Absolutely. Jared, after all the things we talk now, and of course, the long life learning and the interdisciplinary approach, which I would like to hear your opinion on that, by the way. So let's wrap up 2 questions for you. One, what about the interdisciplinary approach in education? And second, more importantly, as a company owner, how do you select your future employees? What kind of skills do you expect every employee would need, which will basically shape the way this new future workforce must be educated?
Absolutely. So I like that you brought up the interdisciplinary aspect of this, because for so long we thought that the most valuable employees, the most valuable students were the ones who just really mastered one topic. They got as far as they possibly could in the educational track that one subject area would allow, and they were considered, the highest paid, the most sought after talent. Now, at least in the last few years, there's been a recognition that having an interdisciplinary education is actually far more valuable, especially as these silos continue to come down and more departments are working with others that they traditionally were separated from. So even in my career, I've I went to school for journalism. I did media studies and journalism, but today I write a lot about the future of work. And had I perhaps done a degree or some sort of education in human resources, maybe that would have helped me a little bit better. Or, you know, someone who becomes a crime reporter just going to journalism school and becoming the best, most educated journalist isn't necessarily as valuable as also having a criminology background as well. And we're seeing more and more of these positions, especially in the knowledge work areas, colliding, where it's no longer just a matter of having a substantial body of background in one particular vertical, but the more verticals you can add, the more value you can provide. And so the way companies should be thinking about hiring the next generation of workers, and a lot of companies are already sort of thinking this way, it's far less about, as I said before, the hard skills that are quickly evolving, quickly becoming obsolete. Knowing a certain programming language is probably good for 2-3 years before you need to relearn a new one. And so the hard skills are becoming less significant, but the soft skills, the things, again, like resilience, which we know right now would be extremely valuable, or, for example, having a managerial staff that has a strong emphasis on empathy is extremely important right now as people are dealing with very unique, difficult situations. These softer skills that, again, for so long were not really valued and not really emphasized are becoming the most important skills. So again, there was a time not too long ago where having a lot of education in one specific field made you the most valuable potential employee to employers. Now we're seeing a change twofold in sort of the two-part question you asked me. One is on the side of interdisciplinary education, which is becoming much more valued than specialty in one area, as well as the soft skills that will allow you to adapt and evolve and grow over time. Again, much more valuable to employers than just a lot of expertise in one narrow field.
Imagine a teenager 100 or 150 years ago. His father or her father is a blacksmith, grandfather was blacksmith, and grandfather was that, and that teenager, he knew that the future is bright. A blacksmith profession is there in the family. But what about now? What about these young people who are now at school, but not exactly? Christina, one of the most meaningful part of your life, or at least that's how we perceive it, is that you're really deeply involved in mentoring teen journalists, the next generation of leaders. You've been working with teens and helping young journalists for a decade now as a volunteer at Vox Atl, a teen-led journalist outlet, non-for-profit organization. So how have teens and children adapted to the world of being at home and not being in person in schools?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're asking about it. So I work with a lot of teens here in Atlanta. The organization is Vox Atl. It's a nonprofit that's been around for just over 25 years. I think we're at 26 now. So I basically just started off volunteering because, I don't know, I just like mentoring people and I really get a lot of value out of it. But it's more that they teach me new things and they force me to see things in a new perspective. Now, all of this has been in person for the past 10 years. And now all of a sudden we have a situation where you don't want to have more than 10 people in one room. You do not want to have teenagers who have been self-quarantined together physically. But what I have found super inspiring is that these kids have set up all these sessions to have on Zoom. So anything from, hey, let's have a teen poetry slam to, well, there was a panel that the teens held themselves about mental health and how they're dealing with all of this, and seeing them connect together and lead that discussion, have that autonomy, and see it play out in a virtual way has been super inspiring. And I think we can all learn a lot from that, right? So we have to remember that, people are trying to say, oh, teens and children should just be doing what the teachers are asking. Of course they should be, but I think what we should also do is give them some autonomy, which is what Esther talked about on Tuesday, right? We have to trust that our kids are smart, that they're going to collaborate in, brilliant ways we just can't be scared of it. They're not afraid of it. They're embracing the technology. And these teens are writing even more stories right now, the teens I work with, because they don't physically have to come into the building to the nonprofit. They have that flexibility to file their stories and write really meaningful content. And even one of them showed up on Don Lemon and was on CNN, which is like, you're 17 years old, like is Terrell. Don Lemon is one of his big, heroes. So, and that all happened because he wrote a personal essay because of what has been happening in this country right now, and being a Black teenager in rural Georgia. And actually, no, that was in relation to Ahmaud Arbery. Sorry about that. But either way, for him to feel like empowered to write a personal essay and then have it put on, Vox's website, and then to reach so many people, I think that just proves the power of the internet and, how teens can get their voice out there.
Absolutely, Christina. I am very, very concerned in regards of how these all new ways of interaction will change the perception of reality for the kids, for the teenagers. I have two boys, 9 and 11, and we've been they're on virtual digital education for the past 3 months, and they just take their exams with A grades, which is great. But at the same time, I see that for them, particular action, like quickly, like, commands when you're saying, hey, come quickly, please, or run quickly when we play tennis or whatever, they kind of have a different perspective on these in-person things. That's very interesting to observe. And it will be very interesting to see how this shift will happen, maybe for good, maybe for better, But we will see. On the other hand, we see the reality changing. We see many new products on the market that are getting ready. For example, the new normal in the offices. Connie, what is your take on, and your research and observation on how the companies are getting ready for welcoming back their workforce, at least the essential, important people of the workforce, back to the offices?
Right. So, essential employees are working, they're going out, they're already out in the field. So you might have seen it in person too. If you go to the pharmacies or the grocery stores, you see a lot of the plexiglass shields. So of course the plexiglass shield and the barriers are a hot product right now. There are many selling on Amazon and on Alibaba. They have that as like the hot new product that's, selling like hotcakes right now. Also talking about innovation, we do see newer inventions or creations by different companies. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a such thing called a no-touch keychain or no-germ keychain, which some companies have come up with, and you see that on Amazon and on Alibaba. But basically what they are is it's a keychain, but you use it to press buttons, use it to open doors. So, people are being innovative. They're taking this moment of hardship as an opportunity. And so that's selling online. I don't know which product is the best one, but there are different designs. And I know people are trying to be creative right now. And also the New York Metro system installed this UV light machine in their trains. I don't know how effective they are in killing COVID-19 virus, but they have implemented this. One company invented this, and they are now doing a test run on some of these cars. And so this UV light will shine on the cars, shine inside the cars, time to time to kill the virus inside. So perhaps we can see companies also buying these products, or there are probably a lot of companies right now trying to invent things like this, probably to use not only in trains, but possibly in hospitals too, as the time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely, Connie. And because we're almost have to wrap up, unfortunately, when I have these wonderful talks, I wish they go on and on and on, but we have that 1 hour airing time, and we already have almost like 8,000 people listening to the future of work and education, and I can listen to for hours, so I don't blame them being with us. Thank you all so much, wonderful WEBIT community. Alex, we were talking about the voice assistants with you, and we've been hosting Adam Cheer, the founder of Siri, here, and he's also a member of our mobile innovation committee at WEBIT. And of course, there from different social media and channels. So in this case, I would like to hear your take on how AI is, what kind of role is playing in the company strategies on one side, and on the other side, which companies are positioned to be the strongest?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so AI is used inside the tech giants in particular, and I believe that this is going to be the case in the broader economy to minimize execution work, to minimize work that supports existing products. Here's an example. Inside Amazon, there's a program called Hands Off the Wheel that has taken the work that vendor managers do and automated it. And what's a vendor manager? Inside Amazon, a vendor manager is a person who's like on the phone all day with different brands trying to stock their products at the right amount in Amazon's warehouse. So a vendor manager would be on the phone with Tide, for instance, and say, we need this many units in these fulfillment centers at this time for this price, and we'll promote it this way. And Amazon looked and said, oh, we have 25 years of retail purchase data at our disposal. Actually, the truth is the machines could probably do a much better job of this than people. And so what they did is they set on this project. They first called it Project Yoda. Instead of the vendor managers doing this, Amazon would use the force, and the force was machine learning. And then they called it Hands Off the Wheel because they literally wanted the vendor managers to take their hands off the wheel and actually give this over to machines. And what that's done is it's freed up the vendor managers to go on and become product managers inside the company and invent new things. And in fact, one of their executives, and this is like just this wild story about Amazon. There was an executive called, his name is Dilip Kumar, and he was working in pricing and promotions. He headed it up inside Amazon's retail organization, working with vendor managers to make sure that items are promoted well on the site. And he goes and spends a year and a half working as Jeff Bezos' technical assistant, which means that he was taking every meeting that Bezos was taking and just watching and observing and learning how Amazon works more broadly. And he finishes up this stint and is ready to go back, but pricing and promotions has been completely automated. And so he's like, all right, I got to find something else to do. So he gets together with a bunch of people from Amazon's retail organization and they say, we're going to use technology to solve the most annoying part of shopping in real life, which is checking out. Everyone loves going and picking products off the shelves. Everyone hates waiting online and scanning and then going through the payment process. And so they develop Amazon Go, which is a store where you scan them with the code, you take whatever you want off of the shelves, and then you just walk out. You don't have to scan each product. You don't have to even nod at anyone. You walk right out and the sensors and the computer vision technology will figure out what you've taken. And then Amazon pushes a receipt to your phone. And I've tried to trick it like a couple dozen times and it hasn't worked once. So the technology is pretty good. So that's what I think we're going to end up seeing. The AI's role in our workplace. It's going to be something that enables people to create more. But this isn't worth anything without the systems that you have to take the ideas and bring them to life. If people inside Amazon don't listen to people with new ideas, then they would just be a company with people with a lot of time on their hands. And I think that's really important. Future organization needs to listen to its employees and most importantly, give them permission to come up with new ideas. And I think those that do will be in really good shape, and those that don't won't. And you can kind of see it, like Google, like we mentioned, they do it pretty well. They've been able to create the Google Assistant, Siri, which you led off with. Apple is pretty siloed, doesn't really give employees lower down permission to come up with ideas. And that's why Siri is far behind Google and Amazon when it comes to virtual assistants, despite the fact that it gave them a 5-year head start.
Absolutely well said. I can't agree more. Actually, our teams at WEBIT and different companies that I'm investor or running are highly stimulated to be proactive, give ideas, and yeah, that's I believe the only way to go. But again, we go back to the soft skills, because at the end of the day, you need to think critically. You need to be very adaptive in order to catch up with all the changes and being in the position to give these great ideas to make them success. And my question for Jared here is, because that's your specialty in this discussion and in general, going back to education, Jared, where should these young people go to learn soft skills?
Yeah, it's interesting. I get asked that question a lot because I feel like there's this impression, less from our generation and perhaps more from our parents, where you go build character by spending a whole bunch of money to go volunteer in some far off place for a summer, and then you come back with soft skills and you're ready to put it on a university application, and you can prove that you've done this sort of teamwork volunteer opportunity. And those opportunities were very limited, especially like to people that could afford it, to people that could take the time off. And so a lot of folks were worried that the soft skills acquisition was reserved for just the people who had the resources to acquire it. As we've learned more recently, you can get a minimum wage job that will teach you so much more than one of those high-priced volunteer experiences on the other side of the world. There's so many places to get soft skills. It's more a matter of identifying them as you're acquiring them. I mean, as students are considering how to spend their summers, volunteering even remotely is a great way to improve some of your skills. And by the way, employers are going to be looking for people who have experience working remotely once they start hiring again. So getting a head start on that is a great way to acquire some of those soft skills over the summer period. But yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. It's more so a matter of identifying it. And that's not something that has traditionally been identified in the education system that we have. We don't have classes for resiliency in high school, as we probably should. And we don't have a way of measuring this on a university application, although schools are trying to become more innovative and understand how to measure these sorts of things. So soft skills are still to this day being acquired in a wide variety of ways, and it's more a matter of identifying how you're picking up those skills through your life experiences. And more they're being measured and sort of compared, and employers as well as institutions are finding very innovative ways to sort of identify them, but they haven't really nailed exactly how to teach them yet. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges that the education system is going to be facing in the near future.
I was hoping to get address and telephone and web address where to send the kids, but yeah, obviously we still have to work on that. Such a wonderful discussion. I'm so grateful to all of you for being with us here. Christina and Connie and Alex and Jared, thank you so much for being with us. With this 60 minutes, you just flew away, but it was so wonderful and meaningful discussion, which we're going to be having in our archives, as we call them, the time capsule. And you've been doing an invaluable contribution, which I'm so grateful to you about. Wishing you a wonderful weekend. I mean, Friday's coming, but then the weekend. And look forward to welcome you back to our virtual studio of WEBIT and our wonderful community around with us. I would like to introduce our next week's special edition. We shall be talking about geopolitics in COVID and post-Europe and post-world, post-COVID world. We shall be hosting some phenomenal guests in our studio as usual. We will start on Tuesday with the leading media panel. So we will start with the journalists to set the dialogue. We shall be hosting the executive editor of Business Insider. We have the Telegraph and Independent, Washington Post, BBC. Then we are having a wonderful Founders Day, demo day with startups. And they will be all positioned into the health security, and it will be great. And then we are going to be hosting very special guest of honor. Her name is Maria Gabriel, and she's the European Commissioner for Education, Research, Culture, Youth, and Innovation. Such a long job title. She's overseeing over 250 billion of the budget of the European Commission, big responsible for everything that makes and will make Europe innovative continent. And another special guest, the Vice President and member of the managing body of the European Investment Bank. So you can imagine such a great top-level discussion. And I'll be having help from the executive editor of Business Insider, helping us with that particular discussion and representing your opinion and your questions. So you can start asking your questions now. Register at virtual.webit.org and join us in our beautiful virtual studio, thanks to our partners from the Virtual Show. Thank you all for being with us, and see you next week on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.